Hey there, and welcome to MurderTube. The case today is a really interesting murder mystery. A man dies alone in his hotel room, but the two possible causes of death are practically impossible to have happened. The best part about this case, though, is that it has actually been solved. This is going to be the case of Greg Fleniken. Greg, by all accounts, was a pretty normal guy. He worked in the oil and gas industry where he was well liked and he didn't really have any enemies, and he had a loving relationship with his wife Susie. It was not uncommon for Greg to spend some time in hotel rooms when he was away for work, and it was on the 15th of September 2010 when Greg was staying in the MCM Elegante Hotel in Beaumont, Texas. Greg was staying in room 348. That evening, Greg's wife had sent him an email just talking about some taxes that she was doing for them, and Greg responded, "You're doing good, babe." It was at that point that Greg turned the AC on full ball, as he always liked to have the AC on, and he lay on his hotel room bed, watching Iron Man 2, eating snacks, and smoking a cigarette. It was the next morning, though, when Greg did not call Susie, and this was unusual as he would always call Susie in the morning when he was away for work. Susie called his office phone and there was no answer. So a couple of Greg's colleagues went to his hotel room to check on him, and at his hotel room door there was no answer there either. The colleagues spoke to the hotel manager and let them know their concern, and the hotel manager called the police and went and unlocked the room 348. Inside the room, Greg's body was laid face down on the floor, a burned out cigarette was still in his hand, and Greg was dead. Now, other than the dead body on the floor in this hotel room, the hotel room really didn't look anything different. There was no signs of a break-in, no signs of any kind of disturbance or a struggle, and no signs of a robbery, as Greg's belongings like his watch and his wallet and stuff like that were still in the room. There was no blood in the room. It was literally a normal hotel room with a dead body laid on the floor between the bed and the hotel room door. Now, Greg wasn't the healthiest of guys. He spent his entire life smoking. So at first glance, the detectives thought that this was likely natural causes, that he had some sort of heart attack or something that made him drop down dead on the floor that night, and they didn't think too much of it at first. But it was when the medical examiner did the post-mortem exam on Greg's body that things started to get very complicated. Greg's groin area was severely bruised, and on his scrotum there was this tiny laceration. When the medical examiner opened Greg's body, there was major internal bleeding, as well as several of his internal organs also had lacerations in them, and he had 2 broken ribs, and the right atrium to his heart had either been burst or punctured. The medical examiner said that the internal injuries were so severe that Greg would have died within about 30 seconds. He also said that the injuries were very common to that of either someone that was in a car crash or someone that was crushed to death. Well, obviously, Greg couldn't have been in a car crash when he was laid on his hotel room bed, so the likely option was that he was crushed to death. The problem is, the hotel room looked fine. There was nothing on Greg when he died. Even if he had pushed something off, there was nothing laid on the floor, nothing out of place. But more importantly, there was nothing in the hotel room that could have caused these damage that were heavy enough to crush someone to death. How can someone die from being crushed to death when they were not crushed to death? So the main detective on this case was a pretty great police officer by the name of Detective Scott Apple. The detective looked into every possible option that he could, and he even looked into possible motives, like some of the common stuff. Maybe Susie was involved somehow with an insurance policy, maybe it was a colleague or a business partner, but none of these really worked out. So they looked into the possibility that someone was in Greg's room with him the night that he died. Maybe Greg had invited someone into his room for some romantic sexual interaction. But that went nowhere as well. Greg was a loving husband to his wife. He was very faithful. He did not cheat, and he did not even invite anyone to his room for anything other than sexual romantic purposes either. Greg appeared to be alone in his hotel room that night that he died. So what we know that happened though is sometime during the evening, Greg was using the microwave and he tripped the power to the hotel room. It caused the power to go out in his hotel room as well as some of the hotel rooms around him. Greg immediately went down to the main desk and told them that he had tripped the power, and they started a maintenance report to get the power turned back on with one of the maintenance workers. When Greg's body was found in the morning, the hotel room was warm and the AC was not on. So we know that Greg died shortly after the power was cut because his hotel room was still cold enough at the time that he didn't realize to turn the AC back on before he had died. We know he died sometime that evening, we just don't know how or why. The detective looked into every possible option and he came up with two potential theories. The first theory is that the suspect is a maintenance worker for the hotel. Now, this theory believes that the maintenance worker went to Greg's room when he was fixing the power cut, maybe used it as an excuse to just say, oh hey, I'm checking up to make sure your power's back on, and when he was in the room, he overpowered Greg or done something to Greg. And this maintenance worker in particular has an extensive history of sexual assaults. And maintenance workers obviously typically carry around tools like screwdrivers. When he was in the room and he had Greg overpowered in some very weird sexual kink, the maintenance worker shoved a screwdriver up into Greg's scrotum. And that is what had caused the small laceration on the scrotum, as well as a lot of the internal damage in the groin area. It was a potential theory as there was a possible means, motive, and opportunity. However, the detective looked into it and really couldn't go anywhere with it. So his second theory involved the people that were staying next door to Greg. There were a bunch of electricians in town due to a big job that they were working on, and a couple of the electricians were spending the evening in the other electrician's room that happened to be right next door to Greg. They were having drinks, having a good time, partying, enjoying their evening off. Now, this theory comes into play because they believe that maybe when the power cut, the electricians who had been drinking and were intoxicated maybe became annoyed that their party was ruined. When they went out of their hotel room, Greg potentially was leaving his room and told them, hey, sorry, I tripped the power. Obviously, people that are intoxicated aren't always the most rational thinking, so maybe the electricians attacked Greg. Now, this theory is important because electricians wear steel-toed boots. These electricians did anyway, as they were working on a major commercial job. So, potentially, these electricians were angry, and one of them gave a swift kick with his steel-toed boots right into Greg's groin. That potentially caused a laceration on the scrotum, would have caused major bruising and internal damage, and Greg would have dropped to the floor. Once he had dropped to the floor, maybe one or two more kicks to the chest area that caused the major internal damage there. And realizing that these hard kicks with steel-toe boots caused major damage to Greg, they dragged the body back into his hotel room, shut the door, and went about their evening and pretended that nothing happened. The detective looked into this theory as well, of course, and it really went nowhere. There was no signs or no other witnesses of any disturbance, argument, struggle. The electricians all seemed pretty friendly and cooperative. They said they were, in their hotel room pretty much most of the night drinking. At one stage they went down to the bar to continue drinking. They kind of knew someone was staying next door because they had heard like a smoker's cough every now and then, but other than that, never saw the guy, never interacted with him, don't know what happened, have no idea how someone could get crushed to death. So that theory kind of hit a dead end as well. At this point, Detective Apple is running out of options. He's tried to explore every possible situation, and he is hitting dead ends at every single turn. Greg's family offered a reward for any information, and that gave nothing. Greg's brother hired a private detective that was a retired FBI agent, and he came up with nothing as well. It was at this point that Susie was advised of a private detective by the name of Ken Brennan. Ken was a retired police officer and DEA agent, and he had made a bit of a name of himself already at this point for solving some cases that were pretty unsolvable. Ken spoke with Susie and he accepted her case. So then Ken spoke with Detective Scott Apple, and Ken told him, look, I'm not the type of guy to come in here and step on your toes or ruin your case. I see this as I'm being brought in to help you out. Me and you are now partners on this. We're going to work together. We're going to solve this. I won't do anything without telling you, and I hope you won't do anything without telling me. And Detective Apple agreed, and the two detectives began working on the case together, going over all the information that they could, all the possible theories, all the dead ends. And of course, Ken wanted to see the crime scene. While they were looking around the hotel room, Ken was looking at pictures of how the body was found, and he said, I need to call Susie for a minute. And he asked Susie, was Greg right-handed or left-handed? And Susie said he was right-handed. And then Ken asked her, when he smoked, did he hold his cigarette in his right hand or his left hand? And Susie said it was in his right hand. Well, the burned out cigarette in Greg's hand was in his left hand. Now this is where some of the brilliance of Ken comes in, as Ken said to Detective Apple, no one was in this room with Greg when he died. He said, the cigarette was in the left hand because Greg was laid on the bed, smoking with his right hand. Something happened to Greg, and Greg knew that he was in extreme pain and needed immediate help, so he was getting off the bed and going to the hotel room door to go call for help. While he was doing this, he moved his cigarette to his left hand so that his right dominant hand was there to help him push off the bed and open the hotel room doors. By the time Greg got off the bed, he basically collapsed on the floor and died within maybe a few seconds. So they narrowed it down and confirmed that no one was in the room with Greg when he died. However, that didn't make anything easier, as how did a man get crushed to death when he's alone in his hotel room without getting crushed to death? So Ken wanted to know about the electricians that were staying next door. They were the closest people to Greg when he died, so he wanted to know what happened with them, and he got all the information from Detective Apple that they were partying next door, they don't really know anything, they didn't talk to him, they didn't interact with Greg. There really wasn't a whole lot of help or anything further to go on with them. But Ken said, well, I want to talk to some of the co-workers of the electricians. By now, the electrician's job had finished and they had gone back to their home state. So the detectives contacted some co-workers of these people thinking, maybe, rumors start to spread a little bit and some of the co-workers have heard information from the main electricians. They spoke to numerous co-workers and they were hit with dead ends all the time. Yeah, I heard about that. I have no idea how it happened. How does someone get crushed to death without getting crushed to death? And they were hitting brick walls at pretty much every turn still. Until they spoke to one of the co-workers who said, yeah, I heard something about an accidental gunshot in a boarding house. But Detective Scott Apple said, no, this wasn't a boarding house. This was in a hotel room where a guy died next door somehow. And the co-worker said, sorry, I don't know anything about that one. As they're returning back home, Ken says, we need to go to that hotel room and just make sure that there's no bullet in that hotel room. So the two detectives go look, and they are on their hands and knees, searching everywhere, searching all the furniture, searching under the beds, they're looking everywhere, and there is no bullet in that hotel room. But then they see this weird mark on the wall, kind of like a dent that had roughly been filled in, but not professionally. When they looked on the other side of the wall, that just so happened to be in the electrician's room, there was a similar dent in the wall that had been roughly fixed. It was later determined that what the wall had been repaired with was some toothpaste that had dried. When the toothpaste was cleared out, there was a clear hole from one hotel room to the other. And when a laser was shone through this hole, the laser went directly to the bed that Greg would have been laid upon. So the detectives believe they figured out what had happened to Greg that evening. Greg was laid on his hotel room bed watching Iron Man 2, smoking and eating some snacks, when there was an accidental gunshot from the room next door. The bullet went through the shared wall and over to the bed that Greg was laid upon. The bullet entered through Greg's scrotum, traveled up through his body, lacerated numerous organs as it traveled, breaking numerous ribs, and hitting the right atrium of his heart. Because the skin on the scrotum is so stretchy, it kind of folded over immediately, making the bullet hole look actually like a small laceration instead, as well as stopping blood from flowing out of it. So the detectives had what they believed happened, but they still had some issues. Greg was not killed by a gunshot, he was crushed to death. So they went and spoke to the medical examiner, and by this point Greg's body had already been cremated, so they only had the pictures to look through. As they're looking through the pictures with the medical examiner, they're asking, is it possible that these injuries were caused from a gunshot? And the medical examiner is saying, well, it is, but it's much more likely that it was something like crushed to death or a major sudden impact. And then they get to the picture of the right atrium, and Ken says to the medical examiner, this is a gunshot. And the medical examiner explains, well, it could be from a gunshot, but what happens with these impacts is quite often like an atrium for the heart can burst and cause kind of a hole like this. And Ken says, yeah, I know, but look at this. This is a gunshot. And the medical examiner looks at the picture again, and then he says, you know what, the media are going to kill me. That is a gunshot. So now all the detectives were left with was finding their suspect and what to charge them with. So the detectives traveled to the state again where the electricians were staying, and they called in one of the electricians that was there that night by the name of Tim Steinmetz. They had Tim go through the details of the night again, just telling him, this is kind of like a basic report like last time. We're just trying to make sure we haven't missed anything. We just want to go through the details of what happened. So Tim went through the same stuff that he had told them previously, and while he was doing so, Detective Apple was writing down notes, and when they had finished, the detective gave Tim the statement and said, look, can you read through this, make sure everything I've put down is, right, if you need to make any corrections you can, and once it's all good, just sign it at the bottom. So Tim looks through and he makes a couple of little corrections here and there, like it was put down that he was an apprentice, but he's actually a journeyman, just minor changes, but otherwise, yeah, we were drinking, we don't know what happened, it looks all pretty much good, and he signs it. And then one of the police officers sign it. Now the detective tells Tim, you have a big problem. You either tell us the true story or you are going to jail. Tim, of course, is confused and says, well, wait, hold up, what am I going to go to jail for? And the detectives tell him, you just signed that police report. We know what actually happened that night, and you just provided us with a fake police report. So either you tell us the true story, or you go to jail for the fake police report. So Tim tells them the true story. There were a few of the electricians in the room that night drinking, and partway through the night, one of the electricians by the name of Lance Myuu pulled out a pistol. Lance, while intoxicated, was flashing around the pistol, showing it off and acting irresponsibly, and there was an accidental gunshot from this weapon. The bullet actually luckily just missed Tim, however it did go through the hotel room wall, and that is where it had killed Greg. The electricians obviously didn't really know that they had killed someone at that point, but they panicked. A couple of them were disgusted by Lance's actions, so they went to their own rooms to retire for the night. Lance himself had panicked, covered in the hole, and then they went downstairs to continue drinking at the hotel bar. None of the electricians went to Greg's room that night, none of them knocked on the door, none of them made sure that anyone was okay. Lance Myuu was charged with manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 10 years in jail. During the court, Susie had her chance to talk to Lance. I have waited over 2 years to look you in the face, eye to eye, and simply have the chance to speak directly to you. You would never have come forward with the truth. You murdered him. No, you didn't intentionally seek him out to murder him, but you murdered him. With every lie you told, with every intentional selfish deception, with every cover-up, over and over again. You saw his body taken out of the room in a body bag the next day. You knew you killed him. He meant nothing to you. This case is a stark reminder of just how easily your life could be taken from you. One minute you're just watching Iron Man 2, and the next minute you're in agonizing pain and dying within seconds. Greg likely had no idea what had happened to him other than he was in severe pain and he knew he needed help. He got off the bed and dropped on the floor within seconds. People aren't sure how long it would have taken Greg to have died. Some say it would have been within a few seconds, and some say it's possible that he was still alive for 20 to 30 minutes, dying on the floor. And not a single person that was in the room next door came to check on him or even knock on his hotel room door. Greg's life was taken from him due to the irresponsible actions of someone completely different that he didn't even know, he didn't even meet. 1 second he's enjoying life, and the next second he is dead. The murder mystery part of this case is interesting, as it sounds like something out of a book or a movie. However, it is all true. And it is rather amazing how Ken Brennan was able to figure this out when everyone else was hitting dead ends and had no idea what had happened. Ken is a rather brilliant man, and this is not the only murder mystery that he has solved, and we'll likely have at least one more future video where Ken comes into play and solves one of these unsolvable mysteries that no one else can solve. Anyway, like the video if you liked it, guys. Dislike if you don't. Let me know in the comments below. If you have any cases you would like me to touch on, be sure to leave them in the comments on this video or any video. I do try to read all of the comments. And make sure you guys stay safe out there, as it is a very crazy world.